Hello, and welcome to a mind-boggling episode of the Bible in 1 year with the preacher's husband. Today, we're going to talk about 2 Samuel chapter 5, verses 1 through 10, and also 1 Chronicles chapter 11 and 12. Now, tomorrow, we're just going to do Psalm 133. Just one psalm for tomorrow, so I look forward to that one with you. Let's jump right into 2 Samuel chapter 5. This is all about David, king of Israel. At the very beginning of this, representatives of all the tribes then came to David at Hebron. They were not his own flesh and blood as much as the Judahites were, but they were Israelites just like he was. The troops who came to David at Hebron are listed in 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verses 23 through 40 that they're talking about here. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. Verse 3, they anointed David king over Israel. Now, this was the third time that David was anointed king of Israel so far. He was once in chapter 2 and then once in 1 Samuel chapter 16 as well. The Jebusites here, they thought that their city was invincible, that David could never get in. Of course, we find out here that clearly he does, and he whoops them. So that's the summary of verses 1 through 10 there. Now we're going to get to chapter 11. This is where David is anointed as king again. Well, this is the same anointing. This is not actually a different time. This is the same time. It's just an expanded version of what we had here. So chapter 11, basically the chronicler skips over a lengthy series of events and he takes us directly to the time of David's coronation. David was not immediately accepted as the king of Israel by everybody, though. He had opposition from Jonathan's surviving brother, Eshbaal, and it took warfare and bloodshed before David emerged as the undisputed victor, which we saw in 2 Samuel verses 1, 2 Samuel chapter 1 and 2. So we get to verse 6 here, and David's capturing Jerusalem, and as he starts, he said, "Whoever is the first to kill a Jebusite will become my chief commander." So Joab, son of Zeruiah, went up first, so he became the chief. Now, Joab was actually his half-nephew, and technically he was already serving as the de facto chief commander, but this just kind of gave him that official designation of chief commander once he accomplished this task. Now, verses 10 through 47 here in chapter 11, these list David's major warriors and heroes. And this covers several decades. This is not just his heroes and warriors at one point in time, but over several decades. So not everybody on this list was around all the time. For this reason, that list of the 30 in verse 11 actually includes more than 30 people. That's why there's more than 30 people, because, well, some of them, there were 30 people during this time frame, then some left and others came, then others left and others came. So there's more than 30 total, but at any given time there were just the 30. Chronicles in verses 11 through 14, they mention only 2 of the men who were supposed to be in this group of the 3. Now, those were supposed to be the 3 that were the best leaders, the most honored of those warriors, in addition to the 30. A parallel list is in 2 Samuel chapter 23, if you want to read that. And that actually adds a man's name, Shammah. So why was he left out of the list here? It makes me wonder. But he is in that list in 2 Samuel chapter 23. They list the third of the 3 there. Chapter 11, verses 22 through 25, another commander, Benaiah, who David put in charge of his bodyguards. Now, Benaiah's exploits include the killing of a giant. Victories over giants are actually mentioned several times in Chronicles, but the story of David and Goliath only occurs in 1 Samuel chapter 17. I'm going to move on to chapter 12, David's first supporters. And this chapter covers a long time span as well, encompassing the years from David's early days hiding from Saul in the desert to his coronation in Hebron. At the beginning of this chapter, Saul was still the king. So no one would have thought about Eshbal's attempt to succeed his father because Jonathan at this time was the obvious heir to the throne. They mentioned these archers who could shoot either left or right-handed and sling stones and shoot arrows from bows both ways. These ambidextrous archers, they were experts with the sling as well, but they were some of Saul's own relatives from Benjamin who were already distancing themselves from Saul. You got to keep that in mind. All these Benjaminites, they were Saul's people, and for the Benjaminites to support David was a big thing. David was not really ready to trust all these people all at once, particularly those from the tribe of Benjamin. And we read about this in chapter 12, verse 16 and 18. 16, 17, and 18. He warns these people that are from the tribe of Benjamin about the dangers of betrayal and what they would get if they betrayed him. And Amasai, the leader, confirmed his commitment under the inspiration of God. Now in 19 through 22, men from as far away as Manasseh signed up to support David. And in verses 23 through 37, this shifts the time period to David's coronation at Hebron. So we've gone from Saul still being the king to now David is coronated at Hebron. Now an army is developed here. David's soldiers in Hebron. There were over 300,000 soldiers that were gathered to follow David under David's command. I found it interesting in verses 29 and 30 that the Benjaminites finally pledged their support to David. Now this was a great change of heart for them. At this point, the entire tribe of Benjamin became loyal to David, though the number of their soldiers were only 3,000. That made them the smallest of all the tribes that joined up with David. Now in 38 through 40, we notice that they're eating and drinking all these things: flour, fig, cakes, raisins, wine, oil, herds, and flocks. And it says, indeed, there was joy in Israel. That makes you think that the times were very prosperous for David, but the reality was it's not. The times were actually not yet very prosperous for David. Most of these, he actually couldn't even feed them. There's no way he could feed 300,000 people. He couldn't do it. Most of them brought their own food. Some of it was provided by relatives of the soldiers. Others sent caravans of provisions from as far away as the most northern tribes to support David's soldiers, his warriors, and to help keep them up. So it wasn't David that was doing all this. He wasn't that prosperous yet, although this made it kind of look that way. So it's a little history background in it. That's all for today. I hope to see you again tomorrow for another exciting episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. And click that like button, that subscribe button, and of course click the little jingle bell so you get updated the next time I put a video in. So we will see you then. It'll be tomorrow.